Joan is the eldest of the 5 children of Dr. Percy and Elsie Cheal. After Joan came our 3 brothers, John, Jim and Frank, followed by me, Elizabeth. Joan was born in Formosa in 1920, and we're going to talk about her childhood memories in Tainan. In 1930, when Joan was 9, the 5 of us were brought back to England. I was only 6 months old, so I have no memories of that time. Over the last few years, our 3 brothers have died, so Joan's memories are the only ones of those early years. Joan, I remember you had a visit to the mountain village, didn't you, with
Yes.
Mother and Father?
Yes. We,
You went across a suspension bridge, didn't you?
a very long suspension bridge, and the river was hundreds of feet below. The whole bridge was moving. We had to hold on to the sides of the bridge as we got there, got over the other side, and the men who had been rowing and walking along with us said they wouldn't come any further.
They were frightened.
They were frightened of the
mountain
people up there. So we walked on our own. We had big suitcases with presents and things for the people when we got there. And we went through a forest, and we finally came out of the forest to their town, the village. And the chief came running out of the building when he heard there were some people there. And he saw, of course, that we were white people, and he didn't want white people there, and he was getting cross. And I was very small. I was about 3, was I? 3. Yeah. And I went up to him and took his hand and said, "Hello," in Chinese. And that broke the spell, and he was very friendly after that. And he told my father that his mother was ill, and she was in bed in one of the tents. So he said, "Oh, we'll go in." And he walked in holding my hand. And Mother was terrified. She thought my head would be decorating the hall,
because the
front
chief
door. The
had
chief
the most.
had heads.
Yes.
And my father sort of held his hand up for Mother to stop. It'll be all right. But anyway, he was only in there a minute, the chief, and he came out and he said, "My mother is very ill." So my father very kindly went in with some pills and gave her something. I think she had something quite mild, really. And then when he'd given her the medicine, he opened the cases and he said, "I've got toys for your children and things that I think you'll be happy about." And they did that, and then we came home.
That's lovely. Okay. Right. That's a lovely memory.
This is on still.
That's okay. And a little while later, when you were still 3, you told me a while back that you wanted to go with Father into the hospital to be able to talk to the patients.
Yes, I thought that would be fun. And so one day he took my hand after breakfast. He said, "Come on, I'm going into the hospital now." "Ooh, how lovely, Daddy." And I held his hand and we got to the hospital door, and he took me into one of the wards, and he said, you can talk to these patients and I'll get on the other part of the hospital." So I ran in. I wasn't at all shy or nervous. I said hello to everybody and started talking to them. And one at a time, all the people that had been laying in bed, really ill, were getting up and looking at me. They'd never seen a blonde child and white skin and someone who chattered like I did.
Yes.
And I went from one bed to the next, and they were all sitting up one after the other and calling across, "She's talking our language." And of course I never spoke anything else. I had the Alma teaching my Janet, and I just grew up talking language with her. And it was great fun. I was talking to all these patients. Yeah. And then someone came and took me along to the next ward, and it was great fun. I did this quite often.
Yes, because your Alma she didn't like speaking English, did she?
She didn't want to learn English. She wanted to say her own language, and I was learning it with him. I mean,
yes.
I hadn't learned anything else. I mean, she was with me all the time.
Yes.
And
because the other person you used to go with was the gardener, wasn't he?
The gardener, oh yes, he he was funny. He used to crouch right down and dig around in the garden, but he'd had malaria.
He'd got a skin problem, hadn't he?
Yes, was it malaria, something?
I can't remember what it was, but his skin was bad, wasn't it?
And my mother was very worried that I was sitting so near to him and watching him digging. But my father, he said, no, it's all right. No one will catch this.
It's not something, yes.
So I wandered round the garden with him as he was digging plants up. And
so this is how you had such good Chinese, wasn't it?
Yes, yes, spoke Chinese all the time.
Okay, that's another lovely memory. And now the next one I think you would like to talk about is when there was the earthquake, when you and John were having a bath.
Right, that's right. In the tin bath, and it was standing on the sink sort of thing, it ran off into the garden. But we were in the pond, in the bath, and suddenly there was a tremendous roar and run, and the whole house shook, and the wall cracked open, and I could see the garden. And I shouted to Alma, I said, Alma, come and have a look, I can see the garden. And Alma said, don't be silly. I said, I see the garden. And she came, and I was looking through the crack in the wall, and she got us out of the bath, and no clothes on. We ran out into the garden. I was frozen to death. And she said, we'll have to stand out here. She thought there would be more rumbles.
Yes.
But there was nothing more, so she said, oh, we'll get you in bed. So took me in and got into nighties and pyjamas and got us into bed. She said, now get to sleep, I'm going for the towels and things. And she went in the bathroom, and she tilted up the round bath to get the water out. And underneath the bath was a snake. And the snake wriggled alive and luckily went down the chute with the water. And none of us were hurt. None of us were hurt at all. And that was that excitement for that day.
That was lovely.
So what year are we talking about now?
1923.
1923.
Yes, when you were 3. And the next memory I've got that you told me about is when you cut Roy's hair.
Oh yeah. Now, it was very, very hot down where the hospital was, and all the British people used to go off up into the hills where it was cooler. So Mother thought she'd take us up in the hills, and she had me and
John. It was just you two.
John. And another missionary said, I'll come with you, and I got a little boy. What's his name? Roy, that's right. And he was the same age as Joan.
Yes,
so all of us went, me of course. So we went up, climbed up the hill, and it was lovely, and the house was nice, and it was in its own garden. And suddenly I had a bright idea, because what's his name? Roy had got long hair which had fallen into ringlets all over his head, down to his neck, down to his shoulders. And I thought, they can be cut off. I'll go and get scissors. So I went into the kitchen. There was no one around, so I opened the drawer and I got the scissors out and I called him. I said, come on, let's play in the garden. So he came, same age as me, and we went behind the shed and sat on a log, and he sat down very happy, and I took the scissors out and I began lopping his hat, and all these ringlets were falling on the ground. All round his feet there were ringlets. Suddenly he realized they were coming from him. Oh no, you can't do that, he said. There was half his head was cut, and the ground was full of ringlets. And he was crying by then, and he ran out, and I ran after him and carried my scissors, and we met Mother on the lawn, and she said, oh my goodness, what have you two been doing? Half his head was bald, and had been cut with these ringlets, and the other half was trailing down to his shoulders. He was crying, I was crying, because I realised I'd done the wrong thing. And Mother wasn't crying, but she was furious. She was furious. She said, come and see your mother. And his mother was sitting under the trees reading the paper. He lowered the paper and saw the three of us coming, all crying, and his head was the thing that caught her eye. She said, oh my goodness, leapt out of the seat. I'm going to England tomorrow on the boat. I can't take him in the boat, half the head with ringlets. So my mother said, oh, we'll take him to the hairdresser and she'll make it a nice shape. And she cut it a nice shape and he went off without ringlets.
That's lovely. Now, one of your memories is when you saw a snake in the chicken run. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, certainly can. I was still only a little girl. I can't remember what age I was, but I heard the noise in the chicken run. All the chicken were flying and quawking, and there was terrible noise. I ran to the end of the veranda in the house, and there was something chasing, and I realized that they were being chased by a very long snake. It was terrifying, and of course I couldn't go out, I couldn't call anybody, but suddenly the gardener appeared, and he went in, which was very brave of him, and he caught the snake by the neck, and he held it up high. The chicken all stopped running about, and he brought the snake to the outside, and it was dried in the sun. My mother dried it in the sun, and I think she made a handbag and shoes out of his skin.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay.
The next memory I had was when we were on our way back to England. I'd never been to England before. It was all very exciting. But we were up on the deck, and I was looking down at the sea where they were full of little tiny ships and children in the ships. And there was one little boy very near the boat. And I said to Mother, can I have some pennies? We'll drop the pennies in and see if we can get them. And we dropped one of the pennies at a time, and the little boy jumped out of the little boat that he was in and dived down into the water, and he came up with the penny in his hand. And we threw several pennies to him. It was lovely. Great fun.
Yes. Okay. Now, you haven't many memories of England because it was so bewildering to you.
That's right.
People were talking a funny language, the country was all cold and strange, and Mother and Father were doing things you weren't used to doing, and Mother was pregnant with Jimmy, so it really wasn't a very good time for you.
No.
But you do remember on the way going back to Formosa, and there was one night, I think there was a fancy dress party, and you went as a nurse.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. There was a fancy dress party on the boat, and everyone was supposed to dress up in something that had been in the cabin. And I looked at Mother and saw, what have we got in the cabin? And she pulled a drawer open, and there were several towels there, and different things, pillowcases and different things. And they dressed me up as a nurse. And I was giggling and thought it was funny, you know. And anyway, we were taken downstairs, and I was put in the line of people that had all dressed up with something or other. And I got the prize, of the first prize of the crowd.
Yeah.
I was very proud.
Yeah.
Do you know, how long did the journey take from England back to Formosa? Can you remember?
A long time.
About 6 weeks.
6
Was it
weeks,
6 weeks?
yes, 6 weeks, yes. You're on the boat a long time, yeah.
And your mother had, or grandma had, Jimmy as a baby then?
Yes. It's Mother.
Yeah, my mother.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
right.
right.
And he was in a drawer, wasn't he, on the boat?
The tiny baby was
because
in the drawer.
There wasn't a cot for
Yeah.
him, so he slept in a drawer.
But Mother said, you two have got to have a sleep now. You've got to get into bed, and we're going down to have dinner in the evening. And you've got to behave yourself and stay quietly up here. So, bye-bye, get in the drawer, And
In the
I
bed.
got in the drawer.
In the bed.
And in the bed, that's right. And I was in the bed, and I had to get to sleep. And as soon as they'd gone, I thought, how boring. I'm not even tired. I'm not going to stay in the bed. So I got up out of the bed and
Persuaded John to join
come
you.
on, John, let's go out in the corridor. We can look down on the dinner service and watch them all having their dinner. And we went out the door, and all along the corridor, outside the cabins, were all the shoes. People had put pairs of shoes that were going to be cleaned. Let's throw them through the bars, I said.
The balcony.
Down onto them all having their meals. Be rather fun. Come on, you get one, John. And so John got one, and he stood there, and I got another one. Who's going to do the first one? He said, I will. So he threw one, and it just landed on the floor down below. No one noticed it at all. So it was my turn. So I had a big slipper, and I looked around to see who I could throw it. And I threw it hard, and it was the captain's table, and it landed on the table in the middle of all the food they were eating. And they looked around, they couldn't see anyone downstairs had thrown a shoe. And in the meantime, we threw several shoes. I mean, this was great fun. We ran back, picked up two, and threw them out. We didn't know where they were going. They were on the floor, on people's tables. Everyone was looking around. They didn't know where it was coming from. And then somebody realized we were up on the balcony, and they
I think it was Father, wasn't it?
It screamed to go back in bed. And my father came round and he said, come on, back in bed. Naughty children. I don't know whether they got the right shoes again.
They would have a problem.
Yeah.
Now, one place I remember you telling me you used to play a lot was a playhouse that was made from the big crate that your furniture came from England, and that Father thought it would be fun to make a playhouse for
Make
you.
a little doll's house, a little children's house.
Yes.
It hadn't a roof or anything, it was just a box.
Yes.
So it was turned on its side, so the top of the box was open, and in a few days he'd built a window, and Mother had made curtains and things,
Yes.
and made it nice. And we played a lot in this little house.
Because you had steps, didn't you?
Yes, you had to have steps, and the house itself was very high because of the ants that you get in the tropics. And the box was balanced on 4
Posts.
by 4
Posts.
posts, and the posts were standing in bowls of water. So if ants came at all, they just got to the water and they didn't go into the house anymore. And we never had any ants or anything up in the house. We often played in this little house. It was great fun.
And I think Mother had to put bowls of water around the furniture in the house
As
didn't she?
well, yes, she
'cause
did,
the
everywhere,
ants.
yes.
Yes. Okay, that's lovely. Now, the next big event was when you went on the holiday to the island.
We were in the main island, and the island we're on is about the size of New York. Not New York.
Of Wales.
Wales. Well,
Yes.
That's
That's okay.
all right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No worries.
And at the bottom of the south of this
yeah.
island were lots of little islands, and people went on holiday there, and they decided they would go on holiday down to the island rather than up on the hills. So we went down to the water
Harbour.
and the harbour, and the boats were all waiting, but they were covered in vegetable lumps. They were in bags of potato and bags of peas and different things they were taking to the islands. And the man who was going to row us there, he said, well, the children will have to sit on these bags. So we sat on the bags, and he said, you've got to stay very quiet, because the boat had no sides to it. They were just logs.
Like a raft.
Like a raft, yes. And we sailed off happy as anything. We got there, and everyone got off, and we walked up the sand, and the first hut was one that had been let for us. So Mother opened the door, and in the middle of the empty room was a table
and a bamboo bed, wasn't there?
A bamboo bed.
Nothing else.
No soft things to lie on. And the table had no idea of cutlery and things. It was just empty. And Mother had brought a lot of food with herself for us to eat, but she hadn't got anything for a table. But gradually, as the days went by, of course, the place filled up.
Yes. And one day you were down in the water, weren't you? And
the pool, that's
yes.
right, the edge of the river on the bank. I was down in the pool, and it was fresh water, it was lovely, and suddenly the water went black. And I screamed. I thought, goodness, this is terrible. And Mother got up from the sand and came over. She said, oh dear, there's something squirting the black water. And she reached across and took my hand, and I said, come on, quickly, whatever's in there might bite you. And I hopped out. But it was,
It was an octopus, wasn't it?
Octopus, that's
yes.
right. And it vanished under the stakes.
The water cleared, didn't it?
The water cleared, and it was all right. But that was a horrible shock.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you had another adventure on the boat on the way back from the island, didn't you? When you were becalmed.
Oh yes, that's right. When the end of the holiday, I think we only had a week or something there, and we got in the boat and started back. And of course you had no bags of potatoes and things. The boat was empty, so we sat down on the floor, and we were trotting along quite happily, rowing, and then suddenly a tremendous wind blew up, and they had to take the sail down. They took the sail down and they sat still. They said, it's all right, the wind will blow us a lot of the way. And of course I understood the Chinese, and we sat there, and the sun blazing on us, and the sun was so hot, and we were sitting there getting...
Because the wind died away and you were becalmed, weren't you?
That's right.
Yes.
After a while the wind died away, and we were very, very pleased. They put the sail back up, and we sailed back into the harbour. But it was quite exciting.
Yes. That was lovely. Oops. I think your next memory was when there was a fire. What do you remember about that fire?
Oh, in the sitting room, we had the sitting room upstairs, and Alma was sitting near the fire with a baby on her knee. It was with Frank, my little brother, and she had nodded off to sleep. She was sitting there with the baby on her knee, but she'd gone to sleep herself. And the fire was getting very sort of full, and suddenly I realized there were people down below, and they'd come up to the stairs, and they were all running up the stairs, and everyone was carrying either a bucket of water or a bowl of water or something, and they ran across the sitting room floor and flung the water onto the fire, and of course there was a lot of spitting and hissing, but the downstairs there were hundreds of the hospital, all the patients, all in their bandages and things, were carrying various things that carried water. And they were all going upstairs one after each other and pouring the water on this fire. And in the meantime, Alma woke up and of course wasn't sure what was happening. She realized that they were trying to put this fire out. She touched the boy to her heart and began running downstairs. And I was just standing there downstairs watching all these people running up, thought it was great fun. And there was the big chiefs that had brought them all,
the fireman,
and he was the main fireman. But he was dressed all in his uniform, and he had a proper hat on and everything.
White gloves.
Yeah, white gloves and everything. He was bowing all the time to my father and saying, we're putting the fire out, it'll go out in a minute, and very much did, yes sir. And father said, why aren't you in old clothing like your men are. No, I'm just watching them, and it's all right, it'll go out in a minute. He was going, and I was watching this, and suddenly Alma came down the stairs carrying baby Frank, and she said, follow me, and we ran to one of the other hospital.
One of the houses, the missionary
houses. And this lady, the missionary,
Auntie
Band, she opened the door. We were standing there sort of smiling. Hello, I said, and Alma, the nanny, said, can we come in? And we went in and told her that this house was on fire. They were putting him out. And you've come here, she said. Oh, well, I'll give you some breakfast. Well, I'd already had breakfast, but I didn't tell her. And she gave me an egg. That was the second egg I'd had that day. Fancy 2 eggs in one day. Oh, it was great. I was terribly excited about this. And I told Alma about it, and she said, yes, have it all, eat it all up. She's given you an egg.
Did you live above the surgery? Did you live above the hospital or the surgery?
No, it was sort of across like over the road. Like that, and the hospital was there.
Right, but that's how the patients managed to see that something was on fire.
Oh yes, and they were all some were in slings and some in bandages around their head, and they were all from the hospital.
Anybody who could walk,
yes.
really.
Yes. It was quite exciting.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway.
And you used to feed Frank, didn't you? Because he was very, very tiny.
Yes. When he became a bit older, and didn't need the breast milk anymore, or any sort of comfort of small milk, he would have a easy porridge or something.
Yes.
And I'd sit him in the chair. He was very little still, but he wasn't wrapped in cotton wool or anything. He was sitting there, and I had the bowl with his lunch in and a spoon, and I was giving him this spoon, but I didn't realize that he had to bite this stuff in his mouth and then swallow it, and then you gave him another spoonful. But I was giving him a spoonful, then I'd scrape the next one, and he hadn't had time to eat the first one. I'd shove the second one in his mouth. Poor kid, he had 2 spoonfuls in his mouth, and he was chewing away and trying to swallow them, and I'd chuck the third one in his mouth. I was absolutely horrible to him, really.
Yes, yeah.
And he was taking so long eating it. I said, you are a silly boy.
Did you have a different Alma by then? Did you have a different nanny?
No,
Or
same
nanny
Alma.
all the way
Yes, all
through?
the way through.
She was all the way through.
Yeah.
She
And
was,
what was her name? Did you know her name?
not her name, she was
No.
just Alma.
Alma.
Yeah.
Yes,
She,
yeah.
she was very nice. She used to sit with the children out in the garden and, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
give them their meals. But I was asked to give the meals to Mike. But I was,
'Cause,
scooping it up and shoving it into his mouth. Poor kid, he couldn't have chance to bite them and swallow anything.
Because you used to push Frank around in your doll's pram. He was so tiny.
That's right. He was a lovely doll, and he was a well doll, and he was a live doll, and it was lovely. I often used to take him round in my car, my pram.
So that really is all the memories that you have. I'm sure you have lots more memories.
I have, yes.
But we'll leave it at that, because I've got just the end piece. We all travelled home in 1930 when you were 9 and I was a baby. And although none of us was able to return to Formosa, we grew up with the knowledge of the love our parents had for the island. Now this year, 2015, 11 descendants of our mother and father are going to join the celebrations in Tainan for the 150th anniversary of the Sin Lao Hospital where mother and father worked and where we were born.